A few days before she was expected to appear in court and formally accept a plea agreement, Victoria Jones was found dead in a luxury hotel in San Francisco. And the timing of that discovery has quietly raised questions far beyond the headlines. This is not a movie plot and not online gossip, but a real situation built on publicly available records and confirmed reporting about a private struggle that was never meant to become public. Behind a famous last name, there was a reality almost no one saw, and that is where this story truly begins. According to court documents and multiple media sources, Victoria Jones had been dealing with legal issues following an incident in April when law enforcement responded to a welfare check after an accidental call. When officers arrived, reports state they observed behavior that suggested possible substance use, and Victoria reportedly admitted to using a controlled substance earlier that day. She was arrested and charges were filed, and from that moment a legal process began to move forward in a structured and predictable way. Instead of pushing the case to trial, prosecutors offered Victoria a plea agreement, a common approach in situations involving substance-related charges. According to publicly available court records, the deal would have required her to plead guilty to specific charges related to possession and resisting arrest, while other charges would be dismissed. But the most important part of that agreement was not the paperwork. It was the condition. The deal required sobriety, random testing, probation, and participation in a structured support program, meaning this was not just a legal process, but a turning point where the system was trying to redirect the situation toward recovery and stability. Her next court date was scheduled, the path forward was defined, and everything was in motion. But just days before that appearance, Victoria Jones was found unresponsive in her hotel room at the Fairmont, San Francisco. Emergency services were called, and an investigation began. At the time of reporting, authorities had not publicly released full details, and it is important to be clear that no official cause has been confirmed. Early dispatch information suggested the possibility of an overdose, but that remains part of an ongoing review, and any speculation beyond verified reporting would be inappropriate. Her family released a short statement asking for privacy, and most media coverage stopped there. But when you step back and look at the timeline, a different picture emerges. A woman facing legal pressure, a structured deal focused on sobriety, a court date approaching, and then sudden silence. This does not imply wrongdoing or conspiracy, but it highlights the weight that can exist at the intersection of personal struggle, public identity, and legal pressure, especially when your last name is known worldwide. While the public sees celebrity connection, the court system sees a case file, and the person in the middle can feel both exposed and invisible at the same time. People close to the situation have not spoken publicly, her attorney has not released a statement, and prosecutors have not commented, and that silence adds to the sense that there is more beneath the surface, not scandal, but complexity. Legal agreements like the one offered to Victoria are designed to create structure and a second chance, combining accountability with support. But frameworks do not remove pressure. They often increase it, because suddenly everything becomes measured, documented, and monitored. For some people that structure is helpful. For others it can feel suffocating, and there is no universal reaction. Being the daughter of a globally recognized actor meant that even minor incidents could become public. Even personal mistakes could become headlines, and that changes how people experience stress. For most people, a legal issue is handled quietly, but for others it becomes part of a public narrative, and that narrative can take on a life of its own. What many people do not realize is how heavy that documentation can feel, not just as paperwork, but as a constant reminder that something went wrong and that your life is now partially owned by a process. Another layer to this story is the location, because the Fairmont San Francisco is not just any hotel. It is a historic and high-profile property, often chosen for privacy and discretion, which raises a quiet question about whether this was meant to be a pause or a reset, though we do not know and should not assume. The timing is also important, because the period right before a major life shift is often emotionally intense. Even positive changes can bring anxiety, and even supportive structures can feel heavy, especially when someone is already dealing with internal struggles. This is not speculation, but well-documented human psychology, because transitions are difficult and uncertainty is exhausting. Her family's brief request for privacy suggests something deeply personal, and that choice should be respected, because when families go quiet, it usually means they are processing something heavy. The public sees headlines and summaries, but not conversations, emotions, or complexity, and that is where many stories lose their humanity. This story deserves analysis, but not spectacle, and there is a difference between understanding and exploitation. It is also important to remember that substance struggles do not define a person. They are part of a story, not the whole story. Victoria was not just a case file, not just a headline, and not just a celebrity's daughter. She was a person with a full inner world that we will never fully know. What remains is a timeline, a sequence of events, and a space where answers should be, and that space can be uncomfortable, but it can also be instructive. Stories like this remind us that visibility does not equal support. Proximity to fame does not equal protection, and resources do not equal stability. They remind us that internal battles are often invisible and that pressure is relative. This story resonates not because of celebrity culture, but because at its core, it is about vulnerability, and vulnerability exists everywhere. Another important point is how quickly narratives form, because within hours of the news breaking, speculation and assumptions began online. But speed is not accuracy, and volume is not truth. Early narratives often harden before full information is available, and that can distort how a person is remembered, which is why language matters and why restraint is important. As more time passes, there may be official statements or conclusions, or there may be none. And that, too, is a possible outcome, because not all investigations end with clear answers, and not all stories resolve neatly. Sometimes the story does not end, it just stops, and we are left to reflect on pressure, support, visibility, and how easily struggles can be hidden. This is not meant to dramatize or alarm, but to contextualize, because context creates understanding, and understanding reduces judgment. A life is never brief, even when it ends early, and it is detailed even when we only see fragments. Victoria Jones's life will be summarized in headlines, but a human life is always more than a summary, and that is something worth remembering, not because of fame, but because of humanity. Behind every name there is a person, and behind every person there is a world, and sometimes that world collapses quietly, without warning and without explanation, and all we can do is learn, listen, and be more careful with each other. This story is not about spectacle or intrigue. It is about the reminder that private battles can exist behind public faces, and that transitions can be fragile moments. If anything, it should encourage conversations about mental health, support systems, and how we respond to people in vulnerable periods. Because how we talk about people when they are no longer here matters, and language shapes memory, and memory shapes legacy, and legacy deserves care. Another layer that cannot be ignored is how easily people assume that access to resources equals access to stability. In reality, emotional security does not automatically come with visibility, money, or connections. Many people in public environments learn early to manage perception, to appear composed, to avoid showing vulnerability, and over time, that can turn into a habit of internalizing struggle. This is not a weakness, it is a survival mechanism, but it can also create distance between what is felt and what is shown. When distance grows, support can miss its target, even when it is available. This is why many challenges remain unseen until a breaking point. It is also why silence should never be confused with peace. Silence often means processing, and sometimes it means protecting others from worry. In moments of transition, that protective instinct can become stronger, not weaker. People do not always share when they are uncertain, and they rarely announce when they are overwhelmed. They adapt, they manage, they move forward, and from the outside, everything looks normal. That normality can be misleading. In cases like this, the public only sees the final moment, not the accumulation that led there. That is why timelines matter, because they show progression, not just outcome. And progression is where understanding lives. When you look at the sequence, the legal pressure, the approaching decision, the expectation of change, and the personal history all converge into a narrow window of time. That convergence does not create answers, but it creates context. And context is essential. Without it, stories become shallow. With it, they become human.